Today, I will be comparing and contrasting both 2311 and Trackhouse Racing on their first season, say who is the better organization currently as we conclude the first season for both organizations. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. Let's first start off with 2311 Racing. 2311 Racing made their debut this year just like Trackhouse Racing. 2311 made their debut this year at the Daytona 500. And 2311 Racing coming into this year had a lot more hype than Trackhouse Racing just because 2311 Racing had Michael Jordan. They had all the star power, which is a really good thing. They had Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin coming to the side of things, and they had full sponsorship as well coming in the season with sponsors like DoorDash and McDonald's and Dr. Pepper and Root Insurance sponsoring them for the whole entire season. Now, this year did not entirely get started off on the right foot for 2311 Racing. As they started off this year, of course, at the Daytona 500, having problems in the race where they had a loose wheel, and of course, being the first time that they were on a track together. They qualified really, really well and had a really good duel at Daytona, but they ended up going a lap down in the Daytona 500 and finishing 17th. And then they had some mechanical problems in the early portions of the year. But as the season started to progress for Bubba Wallace and 2311 Racing, they started showing a lot of speed. And they got their first top 5. It took them a long time to do it, but they got their first top 5 and top 10 in the middle portion of the year at Pocono. Of course, that was a fuel mileage race, but they were able to run a top 10 most of the day, and they were able to do very, very well in that race and get a top 5 in the first top 5 for 2311 Racing. It will be a little bit for they got their second top 5 or top 10 of the year, but their second time they got theirs was at Daytona in the cutoff race where they crossed the line third, but because Chris Buescher got DNQ'd, did not basically got in post-race inspection, they failed post-race inspection, Bubba Wallace is able to finish runner-up to one of his best friends, Ryan Blaney. And then they had their major moment at Talladega where, you guessed it, they were able to pick up their first win as an organization at Talladega, and Bubba Wallace became the second African-American driver to win a NASCAR Cup Series race and the first driver since Wendell Scott did that in 1963 or in 1964. Now, currently, Bubba Wallace has one win this year, has 3 top 5s, 3 top 10s, and sits 21st in points. But I look at 2311 Racing as an organization as a whole, and I will say that organization should have a lot more top 5s and a lot more top 10s than they've had this year. They should have gotten a top 10 or top 5 at Phoenix, but they made a really bad pit call. They should have gotten a top 10 at Bristol Dirt, but they had a tire go down with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. make contact with them, and they didn't get a call that they honestly should have gotten. They had a chance to win Talladega in the spring, but they made a really bad pit strategy by coming down pit road on the final restart to get 4 tires. And instead of having a really, because they got their first stage win ever in the season, they ended up not finishing very, very well in that race or as good as they could have. In the Coke 600, they probably should have gotten a top 10. They finished outside of top 10 because I believe they had a speeding penalty. There have been so many times where this team has shown a lot of speed. And I think at the beginning of the year, there was a lot of hype. Realistically, I said for 2311 Racing, we probably should have given them at least potentially finishing in top 20 in points around that position right now and doing very, very well. And like I said, this year have proved, and I think a lot of that has to do with the new crew chief changes. I say at the beginning of this year, as the year has gone on, I think Mike Wheeler has generally been the problem with this organization. I do think that that was exactly correct. Because as soon as Mike Wheeler came into the organization, well, not Mike Wheeler, Booty Barker came into the organization, their organization improved as a whole, and they started showing a lot more top 15 and top 20 speed, and their crew chief and them have been working together very, very well. Bubba and them gel very, very well on the radio. I've heard them on the radio many, many times, and they're enjoying working together even 3 or 4 months into their time, or 3 or 4 races in their time after not working so long, and they got their first win, which was really, really impressive. Another thing that people need to understand is, yes, they do have a big affiliation with Joe Gibbs Racing, but one thing that is very, very important is that this is basically the Vine family racing. Now, going into next year, 2311 Racing, I think, is going to be making a major, major jump. As going into next year, they are going to have a second car in 22, and they are going to have Kurt Busch working with them in the number 45 car of Monster Energy backing. Crew chief has not been announced at this time, but they're making huge upgrades by acquiring Kurt Busch for next year. Kurt Busch, of course, being a championship caliber driver. He won the Cup Series championship with Roush Racing back in the year 2004. And it doesn't matter what team Kurt Busch has gone to besides Phoenix Racing, They've been up front in most years. He made the playoffs at Furniture Racing in 2013. He's gotten a win every single year, I believe, since 2014. Won at Martinsville in 2014. Got 2 wins in 2015. One in 2016 at Pocono. In 2017, scored a victory at the Daytona 500, though the rest of the season wasn't really impressive on its own. Then in 2018, he won a race at Bristol before leaving the team, making the round of May. And then he joined Chip Ganassi Racing, where he scored 3 victories as a whole. When it was announced that Chip Ganassi Racing, we'll talk about them in a little bit with Trackhouse, when it was they were going to basically get acquired. Kurt Busch going to 23-11 made a lot of sense. There was reports all the way back in May. I look at Kurt Busch coming here to be a mentor and a guidance for Bubba Wallace and really put this team into shape. And I do think that this team is going to have major advantage by bringing Kurt Busch into the organization next year. I think that they will continue to improve going into next year, and I think that they have shown a lot of promise. Now let's jump on to the other organization, and that, of course, is Trackhouse Racing. Trackhouse Racing was announced a little bit ago, and they were more of a team that I think came together right away. It was a team that was formed by Justin Marks, but they had major acquisition by bringing Pitbull, Grammy Award-winning rapper Pitbull, into the organization to take there. And they have Daniel Suarez currently driving for the organization right now as a whole team, of course, formed by Justin Marks and Pitbull. This team has done very, very well at points here. So far, this team has shown, and I think at the beginning of the year, Trackhouse had a lot of promise. So far this year, Daniel Suarez has scored 1 top 5, which came at Bristol Dirt, 4 top 10s, but they said 25th in points. And I think this is where the disadvantage does come a little bit for this organization. I think Trackhouse had some issues on the road course program on that front. They have had issues with mechanical problems, and a couple of them, I look back at Road America, where they had mechanical problems 3 or 4 laps into the race, and they had mechanical problems also, I think, at another track later in the year as well, and they got involved in a wreck in the road course, so it really wasn't Daniel Suarez's fault. It was just a big one. Basically, the curb came apart, and everyone basically wrecked right there. But I think this team, one thing this team that also has had really good, like 23-11, is they've had no major sponsorship problems as well, which has been great to see. I do think at the beginning of the year that, like I said, they showed a lot of promise and they showed a lot of speed and they had a lot going for them. But they made a major announcement, which I think that this would also give them a little bit of advantage as well. They have acquired the rights to Chip Ganassi Racing, at least for their Cup Series program, and are going to be buying up all the acquisitions and assets from that team. They are going to be basically buying up all the parts and pieces, and they get the 1 car back as well. And they have acquired both charters, so both cars are going to be chartered going into next year. And we'll talk about the driver that they are going to be acquiring here in just a second. But they were able to acquire a second car for next year and expand going into next year. And unlike right now 23-11, they do have charters for both of their cars going into next year. Speaking of which, Trackhouse has their driver announced for next year as well. And that driver, of course, is going to be Ross Chastain, who currently drives a 42 for Chip Ganassi Racing next year. I think Ross Chastain has had a lot of good moments this year, but I also do think that he's had some bad moments this year, and he's been not as aggressive as I thought he was going to be. But I think that he has shown a lot as a driver this year as well. He's done pretty solid for a guy who's only in his first full-time season. He's had a lot of Cup experience, don't get me wrong. He's driven for teams like Premium Motorsports and also Spire Motorsports. But he's a guy that's done pretty solid for the Chip Ganassi Racing Camp. It's shown he can contend for wins and have a lot of speed in races, including at Richmond. But back to Trackhouse Racing and their performances. They got affiliation, of course. They got to work with the RCR engines, and with the acquisition of Trackhouse and Chip Ganassi Racing, they're going to have a much more bigger partnership with the Hendrick camp. And like 23-11 race, like I mentioned, they have a lot of funding going into next year as well, which is really awesome to see. The Trackhouse is continuing to show some good stuff. And over the last couple weeks, even though they kind of been down, they've had some top 15s and top 20s, but they haven't had a finish outside the top 25 since the Indy Road Course, which is really great to see. And they got their first top 10 this past week at at Texas, since all the way back earlier this year. So they've been doing a lot of stuff and have been improving. And some of the strategies they've been making as a whole have been really good. Plus, they have the really good guy working in the main things right now, which, of course, that is the main guy working in there, which is really Ty Norris, who's been doing really good as well. So now let's jump into the comparisons and the contrast to both organizations. Where can I compare both of these organizations? Well, first, let's talk about 23-11 and Trackhouse's sponsorship. Like I mentioned, both teams have really good sponsorship going into next year and even into this year as well, where they were both able to be fully funded for this year as well. It is very tough for not only one team to be fully funded, because some teams it's very hard to struggle for funding and sponsorship. The fact that not in their first year they were able to have enough funding to have for both of the teams going into next year was really, really impressive. Of course, it does help that they were able to have a lot of backing on both of their parts for this year. They were able to have full backing on those aspects, but it was really great to see there. They've also, for first organizations, I've been really, really impressed with them this year. They've shown quite a bit of speed. And I do think with the next-gen car, they both are going to be very, very solid in many, many ways next year. Now, we'll talk about some of the contrasts in here in a second, but I think both teams have been really impressive at points here and have shown a lot of speed. Now, where do I contrast both of these teams? First one, the road course advantage. I think you have to give the road course side of things over to Trackhouse Racing. I think Trackhouse Racing has overall, as an organization, been better on the road courses. Yes, they've had issues with mechanical problem stuff on road courses, but when they've been good on road courses, they have been really, really good, top 10 and top 15 speed. The disadvantage is 2311 and Bubba Wallace, and I do think that this is something that Bubba Wallace has to work on in his road courses. Now, I do think the last two road courses that we have ran, I do think that Bubba Wallace has been a much better driver on road course, finishing the top 15, I think, at the Indy road course, and finishing the top 15 at the Charlotte Roval as well. So he's been getting much better as a driver at road courses as well, which is really, really good to see that he's been improving as a driver right there. The other disadvantage, though, I have to give is going to go to Trackhouse Racing when it comes to next year. I think the advantage for next year is going to go to 2311 Racing just because they have Kurt Busch. I mean, you can't go wrong with Kurt Busch being there. Kurt Busch is a championship caliber driver. He knows how to get it done. He knows what it needs to be right on the cars, and he'll tell the team how to get it done. And I think he's generationally one of the most underrated drivers in NASCAR history. Of course, the NASCAR Cup Series champion, and he's going to come in this organization again. He was one of the biggest free agents, and I said whoever was going to get Kurt Busch going into this year was going to be a huge advantage as a whole for the organization. There's no offense to Ross Chastain, but I don't think Ross Chastain is anywhere close to Kurt Busch's level as a driver. I think Ross Chastain is a very solid driver who I think could have a very solid career in the NASCAR Cup Series. But I do think that having Kurt Busch go to 2311 is going to be a major advantage to that team, and they are going to improve. And I think not only could Kurt Busch make the playoffs next year, but I think that Bubba Wallace will also make it to the playoffs next year as well, potentially. I think that both drivers in Trackhouse next year will both be able to have a chance to make it plus, but I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. Now jumping into who do I think has been the better organization as a whole this year. Like I said, I think the team that had the better organization as a whole at the start of this year, I would have given that advantage to Trackhouse. But right at the second half of the year, things started swinging in 2311's direction. Like I said, they made a lot of personnel and a lot of great moves for both of for Bubba Wallace and that organization, and they improved. So if I had to choose which team has been better as a whole, I'm going to give that advantage right now over to 2311 Racing after the first year. And I really don't see Trackhouse really taking that advantage. And of course, it does help that 2311 does have a win, while Trackhouse does not have a win. They do have advantage in top 10s. I also believe that they're really close when it comes to lap sled, though I do think that Bubba Wallace and 2311 Racing, they do have some more lap sled currently than that. And they do have a better average finish as well for 2311 Racing with the 19.1 compared to Daniel Suarez, who has a 19.9 average finish. And if not for some of the issues that Bubba had in the early portion of the year, Bubba Wallace could have been competing for a playoff spot this year to make it into the NASCAR Cup Series Plus. And if you had won at Daytona, he would have made it and potentially could have gotten 2 wins. And like I said, the advantage on the win side of things goes to 2311 Racing. So the team that I think is better as a whole right now has to go to 2311 Racing right now after the first year. They're the team that I think was better than Trackhouse Racing. So, anyway, that is it for today's special NASCAR video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications so you notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support page so in the description below for that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. Which organization do you think that has been a better organization as a whole? Do you think that Trackhouse has been a better organization, or do you think that 2311 Racing has been the better organization as a whole? Let me know in the comments below. I'm very intrigued to see your guys' opinions in regards to that. Tomorrow, normal NASCAR news content will return to the channel where we'll talk about all the NASCAR news that I've missed over the last couple of days. So be be able to check that out very, very soon. But anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. And I'll see you guys for next time for some more great and awesome NASCAR content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.